Ahmedabad now has been what, 3 months for you? 4 months?
I moved here in March.
March.
Yeah. So to start a new job,
Yeah.
and then yeah, we got married in May, and
Mm,
then yeah,
yeah.
now.
That's when we last met, May. So fun fact, I was DJ at Neha's wedding. One of my, I think it was last year, a year before, I was writing down like, what are my 10-year goals? Like, I want to have like these big, audacious 10-year goals. And one of them was around this whole DJing stuff. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be like a proper DJ or not. And over the last few years, I've not been DJing a lot. But one of my big 10-year goals under the DJ bucket was I want to play at my friends' weddings. And I want to play
Oh,
at like, again, it's a bit thing, but I want to play like destination weddings. Like, you go only like to a new place only to DJ. And this is like a mishmash between two. So yeah, I was like, check mark. I've done one of that. So
yeah.
yeah.
I saw your last whatever newsletter that
Uh-huh.
comes with the Reuben podcast,
Oh
Reuben's
yeah.
podcast, and it said the things that you had done, and then there was pictures play DJed at a friend's wedding, and
Yeah.
there were pictures of us and with bomb. That was
Correct.
nice.
So that is what was one, and I got it
Yeah.
done. But yeah, if you're listening and you're a friend of Reuben, you can consider inviting Reuben to DJ at your wedding. It will align with my 10-year goals.
Well, and
Um,
highly recommended.
highly, you know what? I kid you not. There was the I forgot her name, but the lady who actually helped coordinate get my equipment from Goa,
Yeah.
Mary, I think I forget. Out of the blue, I think maybe like a month or 2 months after the wedding, she sent me this message saying, "Hi Reuben, something something. Uh, when I first heard that it was going to be DJ music, I was very like, I was not sure what to expect, la la la. But you did such a great job, la la la." And I think she had asked me to play a song which I had played at her wedding, which was like some 50 years ago, 30 or 40 years ago. And she
You
had,
had played at her, was played at her
yeah,
wedding,
that,
you
that
mean?
song played at her
Yeah.
wedding, and she'd asked, and I
Uh-huh.
played for that. And of course, I
Uh,
mean, I think only she and her husband recognized that song. Nobody else was dancing. But anyway, and she was like, "Oh, the last time we danced to that song together was at our wedding." And I was like, "Oh, so sweet, yeah." But yeah, I was very touched by her
Mariam,
message. Mariam,
Mariam.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so for people tuning in, um, we are back to Stephanians on the podcast. There's been for the last few episodes, there's been a lot of people who I met or I crossed paths with at Bain. Neha, of course, I met in 2010, so almost 14 years ago. In July of 2010, we met at Stephens, and yeah, we most recently ran into other when Neha got married in Missouri or Landor, which is a
Yeah.
beautiful wedding, great music, I must say. And maybe a good place to start is what Neha has been up to over the past decade. So I'm going to run through it really, really quick because there's a lot of stuff, and hopefully I do it justice. Some of the names I may not get right, but Neha, you correct me. So we met back in 2010. You were studying history in Stephens. This was from 2009 to 2012. You then went to D school to do sociology. This was 2012 to 14, so still around Delhi. You then spent a few months interning in Rajasthan with a community of musicians. You wanted to be a ethnomusicologist, which you have to explain to me what that even means. But you did that for a few months. You then went to work at Itasha for 5 years. It's a skill development organization. Um, you did a bunch of journalist gigs along the way. You can find a bunch of Neha's articles in the scroll. You then went to be an urban fellow program. You did the urban fellowship program. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
at IIHS, Indian Institute of
Human settlement.
Human Settlement. You did that in 2018. You then worked as a part of Roshni in the National Rural Livelihood Mission, 2019. You spent 5 years there. That was crazy. And as you said, you recently moved to Gujarat, Ahmedabad, to work at SEWA, which, fun fact, is the largest central trade union platform, trade union for women, 2.9 million members. And you've
Oh,
been
that's
there
some good
for
research,
good
Reuben.
research. Yeah. See, Reuben prepares for these, which is why people, when you come to this podcast, send me a voice note in time, not like 12 hours before. So
Sorry.
yeah, that's what Neha
Yeah.
has been up to over the decade. So lots of stuff.
Hmm.
And, but Neha sent me a 30-minute voice note, which was very, very long, which I might, put at the end of this conversation. Is worth listening to on how all of this sort of, I don't know, connects to this bigger jigsaw puzzle of what Neha has been up to. But we'll talk about it through the podcast. But a good place to start is we went to Stevens together. We overlapped for 2 years. We were part of quote unquote the family. um, what was your favorite memory from your time at Stephens? Now, when you look back at it,
I think going together as a to Guaya Hall to drop off our clothes and then
Mm.
eating parathas, I think that's something that I often talk about. Like either deciding whether we should go to the South Indian dhaba or go
Yeah.
to go to eat parathas. I think that was good fun.
Did you have
I
a
think I also,
preference between the two?
yeah, definitely. I like the parathas better.
Oh, me too.
I also think like in third year we would go to Bom's house. And Trisha would also come to
Yeah.
Bom's house. So on Tuesday dinner was like set.
Yeah.
Bom's house for YY with his mom's famous beef pickle. I think that
Yeah.
was a great memory
You know what? I
also.
don't know when the last time I had YY. It's been like
Oh,
ages. I think
ages.
it probably was like probably last Tom's house. Like
Oh,
I
you
don't
should have
think.
had some in Missouri actually. That's where I first discovered YY. And the
Oh yeah.
YY with cheese is like the every Woodstock students
Hmm.
go to.
Oh.
It's
Okay.
like
So
comfort food.
going to Guire Hall to give clothes and eating YY at Mom's house.
Yeah, but I think also another, I know you asked for one memory, but I'm giving
Yeah.
you three. But like, I think that trip that all of us took to Goa,
Oh yes.
that was a fun trip.
That was a fun trip. That was what
Yeah.
20. Bomb was around. No, Bomb had already graduated.
No,
Not yet.
Bomb. Yeah, yeah. He was in his master's.
So this was
Yeah,
around 20.
we were all in third year. So 24 or
Correct.
2012.
2012.
Or, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we had some leave before an exam, in fact. I think the Diwali break or something came before
Yeah.
before the
That was
internal
a
exam.
really good trip. I only remember us in the shack, like dancing on some tables. But what else did we do that entire trip? Like, do you remember what is your like one memory from that trip? The one memory I had is we went to Cocktails and Dreams, and it was a great night. Let's put it that way. And then the second one was you guys eating the food for the dog.
Yeah.
Those are the only two memories like vividly have.
Sticky rice.
Sticky rice, correct. Oh wow, the sticky rice. So for people who are listening,
Yeah.
like we were staying at my uncle's house, and there were a bunch of our friends who were originally
No,
from the north.
11. There were 11 of us, I think, or 9 of us totally.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, a bunch of us, and a lot of our friends were from the northeast. So weirdly enough, when they like, and of course we were eating a lot of Goan food, right? And then we were at this house, and they opened the fridge. I think it was a late night, and they got this food out, and it looked like a bowl of rice, and seemed sticky rice, and they were like, "Wow, there's sticky rice, right?" And they started eating it, and then my uncle storms into the room, and he's like, "Guys, what are you doing?" And then everybody's looking at him like, "What? That's Butler's food." And who's Butler? Butler's the dog. So that is the story of the sticky rice. But what was your favorite memory from that trip in Goa?
I think I really enjoyed all of our trips to the shack, eating like prawn curry rice, eating so much of calamari.
Yeah.
Cocktails and dreams was also fun. I really enjoyed like we went to your paternal grandma's house. You
Oh
call her
yes.
housing, yeah, I
I was
remember.
saying, yes. She was very upset
And
to see me in my jhola. She was like, "What is wrong with you,
no,
Reuben?"
also we were really late. I
Oh
remember like
yes.
yeah, she was like kind of correcting you for like, it's not okay to be so late. You were like
Yeah.
2, 3 hours
Oh
late.
God.
And yeah, but meeting your uncle's family, and then going around like the old part of Goa, like
Hmm.
seeing all of those churches and stuff. I
Oh
really
yes.
enjoyed that part. What is it? Basilica of Bom Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basilica, yeah.
Have you been to Goa since then?
Yeah, I've been to Goa thrice after.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the most recent time was with my husband's family for their
Hmm.
family trip, and my husband is also a Goan.
Nice.
So yeah, we spent time in the south of Goa with his family. I got to know his family a bit there. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Very nice. Okay. So that was time in college. After history, you went to D school to do sociology. I think around that time you also said you wanted to do. So for people who knew Neha back in college, she was also spent a lot of time in music. Neha sings very well. What is an ethnomusicologist, and why did you want to become that?
It's so just very crudely, it's kind of like looking at music and culture.
Hmm.
So it can be different things. It can be like understanding different types of folk songs. Like, you can look at the musical part of it, look at,
Yeah.
how the music itself is evolving. It can
Hmm.
also be about themes, how culturally it's evolving, and what do the songs tell us about the society? What
Hmm.
is the role of that music in society?
Hmm.
So yeah, broadly it's that.
Got
Uh,
it.
I and I also wanted to like understand a little. So if you knew me in college, every project of mine was on around something to do with some
Yeah.
looking at music and folk songs as a source for like of his history, knowing society at the time better. But yeah,
Hmm.
the school I studied sociology, and I also wanted to know a little more about like what ethnomusicologists do. So I went to this place in Rajasthan, and this is actually the organization I worked with. They were the first to take manganiyars and langas to the stage. So I
Hmm.
don't know if you know what manganiyar and langas are, but if
No.
you Google folk musician in Rajasthan, often you will find these two caste groups
Hmm.
show up. But they're castes of hereditary musicians,
Hmm.
and they're still very much tied to their judgment. So that's like a patron, and
Hmm.
it's a patron client kind of relationship.
Yeah.
So literally their trade is music, and
Yeah.
all they do is sing. They are folk musicians, but they have their own they have their own whole rag system.
Yeah.
So it is like they do have the practices, so to speak, of classical musicians. It's just
Yeah.
that they don't write. They're
Yeah.
not a literate culture.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so they most of these people are dependent on their patrons for everything. So it's like
Yeah.
you sing, and you sing at all birth, death, marriage rituals, or whenever your patron wants entertainment.
Hmm.
And that you get, he'll give you cows, he'll give you camels, he'll give you wheat for the whole year,
Hmm.
and
And who are these patrons like? Like, can I
you
just go
don't
be a patron for one of these people?
no. So they're tied to certain caste groups also. So for the Manganiyars, it was Rajput Bhattis or something like that.
Oh,
One group
okay.
of Rajputs, and for the Langas, it was the Meher Muslims and the Sindhi Sipahis. So they're
Got it.
also
Got it.
tied to very and to families.
Ah,
It's not like, from within one group, I can just go find another person from the same. You're tied to a family, quite
got it.
literally.
Got it.
What
And
was
what?
also interesting.
And sorry, what if like, is it the case that if I'm born in this, say, whatever musician family, I just got to start singing?
Yeah, kind of.
And if I can't sing well, if I suck?
So you'll find something to do. So you can't, I mean, you can play the harmonium. It's not like you're always going to be a singer. They
Okay.
also have their own instruments.
Okay.
So the Manganiars play the kamaicha, an
Uh,
instrument which they make, and
uh,
then they play it. It's called the kamaicha. The Langa plays something. They play the sarangi.
uh,
Sarangi is well known, and then there's also these musicians. They're like these clappers.
yeah.
They're
Yeah.
called khartal. So
Yeah.
that also. So you'll do something, but the thing
Got
is
it.
that it's not that it's a force. It's also that you don't really have access to much else. So this is all
Got it.
people know. This is like, everyone is doing it.
And
Of course,
and
now
do
the
people
newer
like?
generations are moving away
Hmm.
from this because, yeah, they're getting educated or there's not that much opportunity in this, so they're moving away from it. Yeah.
But do people like compete? Like, will different people like compete to get a patron? Like, oh, please, select me as your
No,
whatever.
you can't.
No.
So it's not a competitive, it's like a
Oh.
ritualistic relationship.
Hmm.
So a lot of Manganiyars or a lot of Langas will actually feel scared that if you upset your patron,
Hmm.
they'll kind of cut relations with you, and that's sort of jeopardizing. So where will your
Money come
grains
from?
come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, who's going to provide? Also, like there's been a lot of, now these musicians are getting opportunities in Bollywood. They're
Yeah.
getting for like little concerts and weddings and stuff. So there is some mobility, and it led
Okay.
to a lot of caste violence also.
Hmm.
So there have been cases that are like about 4 years ago. It was all over the news where one whole village of vineyards actually migrated because two musicians were actually beaten to death because the patrons like were drunk.
Oh
These were
shit.
young boys. They didn't like what they were singing, so
Hmm.
they beat them up. Um, and in a lot of the interviews that were written about, they also said that they don't like that our community is now earning money. That there have
Hmm.
also been instances where someone got to do work in Hyderabad, and then someone from the patron sort of caste group sort of traveled, and then they couldn't beat them in their own village, so they sort of beat
Oh,
them up in Hyderabad. So it's a lot of power dynamics. Yeah.
got it. You told me that in this experience, you realized that a lot of these musicians were essentially just like rural poor. And then that sort of, got you interested in this whole world of poverty alleviation and things like that. Why did you not want to continue down the path of an ethnomusicologist?
So I felt like it was too indulgent.
What does
You
that
can
mean?
read like it's just something you do, which it, all of us have something that we like that gives us pleasure.
Hmm.
I can read something and it gives me pleasure,
Hmm.
but I want it to be also useful, right? And I
Hmm.
feel like, it's also not about me. I loved listening to the music that I got access to through that organization.
Hmm.
But what I realized was that the younger generations weren't like pursuing it the same way at all. And because they didn't really have an incentive to do it at all.
Hmm.
If you're going to just record these songs and put it in a museum, you're not contributing to its continuing. It doesn't need to continue the same way. Even like art evolves, you have modern
Hmm.
art, their music can evolve too. But
Hmm.
no one's investing in that. So
Hmm.
because people are poor, they're losing. And they're not, they were really, really the older generation, like they were fantastic musicians.
Hmm.
They do the same riyaz, the same rigor that you see that
Hmm.
anyone from a gharana, performing classically, has the same
Hmm.
rigor. But it's just
Hmm.
that they're from a community and they're not respected in their
Hmm.
state.
Hmm.
So yeah, which is why I wanted to work with livelihoods and poverty alleviation, as you said.
Hmm. Interesting. You mentioned that you did some stuff in Kathputli Colony. I remember when we used to meet you in Delhi, you were most of the times in Kathputli Colony. What were you doing there? And maybe for Kathputli people who don't understand Hindi, and I don't know if correct me if I'm wrong, but Kathputli are like puppets, right?
Mhm.
So what is Kathputli Colony?
Colony.
What were the protests happening there? Because there was another example you gave me on why you eventually wanted to get into this world of poverty elevation, and then eventually get to do what it
Yeah.
sort of explains how you move to what you're doing today.
So I had a lot of questions, and I still really wanted to work with art and performance,
Hmm.
not art, but like performance, like related, music, and
Hmm.
even I was becoming interested in dance. So I wanted to find something closer to Delhi because I was
Hmm.
still in my masters.
Yeah. Oh, so
And
you were doing all
sorry,
this
yeah,
while you were at the school.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So my
okay, okay, okay.
first summer, like my first summer vacation, I spent the summer at Rajasthan with this
Got it.
organization. And then the next, yeah, after I came back, I wanted to find something close to home.
Hmm.
So I found that there was this colony, and a lot of these communities, a lot of these in Rajasthan, especially, there a lot of these communities of performers are actually nomadic.
Hmm.
So some nomadic, some are just moved to cities because they find more work in cities.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, Kathputli Colony was a colony in the west of Delhi near this
Hmm.
place called Shadipur.
Hmm.
Shadipur is on the blue line if people know towards Dwarka.
Hmm.
The colony was walking distance from the Shadipur metro station.
Hmm.
But it's a colony of like, lots of people live there,
Hmm.
but there is a sizable number of people from the Bhat community. Bhat community are all puppeteers.
Okay.
There are also some communities from Hyderabad who work as magicians.
Hmm.
There are
I mean,
also some other communities which
hmm.
work as like stilt walkers and fire breathers. So a lot of them got opportunities to work in circuses, which would
Hmm.
happen around like everywhere.
Yeah.
But they were living here. And I mean, uh, yeah. So the protest that we're having was that the Delhi government, the DDA, the Delhi
Hmm.
Development Authority, had sort of given their land away to a private builder who was going to raise their homes.
Hmm.
And they were going to be resettled in certain high-rise apartments, but it was the amount of land that they were going to get was something
Hmm.
like 1/6 of what they originally had.
Got it.
So the protests were about that. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I went there because I was interested to interact more with musicians.
Hmm.
Uh, But yeah, and there's something important which I didn't mention actually. All of
Mm,
the people I met in Rajasthan and also these people I met in Kathputli Colony,
mm,
many of them had international connections and linkages. Like they're really poor, but like you're sitting in this village and someone's asking you, आप कब जा रहे हो? So I'm saying मैं अगले महीने जाऊंगी. कहाँ जा रहे हो? मैं दिल्ली वापस जाऊंगी. अच्छा,
mm,
मैं पेरिस जा रहा हूँ. Very nonchalantly, like, it's normal.
yeah.
And the same in Kathputli Colony as well.
Mm,
So there were certain people who saw potential in these artists and wanted to kind of help them build their skills, give them that
mm,
exposure. That so that exposure was there, but it was very few people in the community.
mm,
And then those set people were sort of monopolizing the opportunities, the foreign
mm.
connects.
And is that the
But yeah.
reason why like other people like aspire to become like that? Because like I'm just wondering if I'm a puppeteer, like or if I'm like an 18-year-old or 17-year-old, why would I want to become a puppeteer? Because I don't think the puppeteers like make too much of money or the fact I don't know my assumption, or they're like so illiterate they're like there's actually nothing else I know to do, or it's just like hey we are just a community of puppeteers and this is what we do. We I don't know do
Yeah,
puppets, right?
it's a mix of all of these. Um, uh, it's a mix of all of these. Some of them and it's not that people are only doing this, they've sort of diversified. So many people have realized that, they've changed the size
Uh,
of the puppets that they make. A lot
uh,
of people got jobs in, Zangura, they had that Kingdom of Dreams
yeah.
in Delhi. So they learned other skills, like the people who are stilt walkers and stuff also learned things like trapeze
Uh,
arts,
uh,
working ribbon. There's something called
yeah.
ribbon. So they learn. They've also some of them signed up for dance, contemporary dance classes, and this I'm talking about acrobats.
Uh,
They
uh,
learn these kinds of things. The puppeteers, experimented with making different kinds of puppets. But
uh,
then they've also diversified. So, along with their puppetry, they also play a little bit of tone, taking up jobs like dhol bajana for weddings.
uh,
So they have to make money.
yeah.
And of course, moving out of something that your family has done for generations is also a big risk,
Yeah.
especially if your family is poor. So all of their networks are built around that.
Uh,
And there are few opportunities, few people who are willing to take them to the stage in the Netherlands and different parts of Europe. They do get those kinds of opportunities also. And that's
uh,
for these select communities. So yeah, these are some
uh,
reasons why people continue. But largely it's because it is what they do. It's safe.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. You said that, it was these experiences that got you thinking about the path you eventually went down. What did you learn about poverty or vulnerability in your time in Kathputli or in Rajasthan? Now that you've, I think, spent a decade looking at the space, when you look back, were there some things you realized about poverty during your time then?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with not having an asset.
Uh,
That's a first, I'd say. So even in Kathputli Colony, like people didn't have a house, and the whole protest was that whatever they had built, most people
uh,
like literally build their own houses, and slowly,
uh,
incrementally, it'll start with one room where everyone
uh,
is living in that one room. It's like a family of 9, 10 people in a small space.
uh,
Anyway, not having a home, falling sick all the time, not having good nutrition,
uh,
and health expenditure is something that actually keeps families in poverty.
uh,
Not having access to proper, education. So it's not just about being literate. It's also about forming the connections and uh, yeah, having some mobility. So that
uh,
mobility in terms of it's not in terms of also what you can do in the economy is kind of impacted by how far you go in terms of your education.
uh,
And also getting the exposure. A
uh,
lot of these people also like a lot of slum colonies are actually not even close to the road. So for them to, if I live in Kathputli colony, for instance, the
uh,
nearest mall may be 5 or 6 kilometers away, but I'll have to kind of change like two or three modes of transport for me to
uh,
reach.
uh,
That was one thing, and in general, the places where they live, like the built environment is not conducive to like healthy living. So you
uh,
are prone to illness just because of the way your house is. It's always damp. There's no
yeah.
sunlight. You're going to fall sick. There's no drainage. you're always wading through, or often have to wade
Yeah.
through, standing water. That's something that affects. And
Hmm.
standing water also breeds disease. So you get dengue,
Yeah.
typhoid. These are all really common. So it's a mix. It's multifactorial, as they say in
Hmm.
public health language. It's not one thing.
Hmm.
It's kind of the environment in which they're living, the exposure they have, and the social capital
Yeah.
that they have, and also the assets they have. I think you did a podcast with Manasa, and she
Hmm.
was also talking about how she understood different kinds of capital,
Yeah.
and how she was privileged, and
Yeah.
person in a rural setup, how they're underprivileged. My
Yeah.
learning was kind of similar, but yeah.
Interesting. I know when you were telling me, when people like me, and I would say people who've not sort of worked in the industry quite a bit, think about, oh, people don't have jobs, just skill them or give them skill, and they'll get jobs and problem will be solved. Um, yeah, I think when you explained it, saying that, oh, it's not actually just giving them skills, it's making sure they don't fall sick. It's not only about getting them not sick, they make sure they can eat nutritious food. Um, they have access, la 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 la, and it's a much bigger problem to solve it. I mean, you've been in this industry for like 10 years, give or take, and it's like there doesn't seem to be anywhere close to like a silver bullet to solve like the problem of poverty, right? Or there are a
No,
bunch
not
of
at
these,
all.
like problems, and they're so sort of, there's such unrelated things which affect it. Like if your area just gets flooded, that means you can't get to work on time and you're going to keep a job, even though you might be very smart. Don't you get demotivated? Like thinking about just problem after problem after problem. And
Who
then,
do, me or do people get
yeah, like
demotivated?
you, like, don't you get demotivated, like working in this? Because there is just, and the thing is, you also work in like NGOs or government, which have their own challenges as organizations. Forget about them trying to solve poverty, them trying to do anything of significance has its own kind of problems, right? Like, how, like, what keeps you going?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, it's not like everyone. I wouldn't be the only person saying that I've struggled with burnout, compassion fatigue. And I think
What
when
is
you see,
compassion fatigue?
so it's like when you're seeing someone really suffering, and it's just like, okay, it happens all the time.
Mm,
That compassion fatigue, and there were times. I mean, in a way, not being surprised, I do feel like, there are many things that you see when you first, go to a community which is poor or like underserved. There are certain things, it's like shocking to you. And I do feel that you need to be a practitioner in this space. You don't need to overcome that. It's when it
mm,
stops surprising you, but that's when you can start thinking towards, okay, what can we do about this?
mm. Can you give me an
Uh,
example of something which maybe surprised you, and now, like in maybe in recent history, you walked in, it would have surprised you maybe 7 years ago, but you're like,
okay.
whatever.
So, well, this is when I used to teach at Itasha. So all of my
Mm,
students were from, these different, and even in the slum, there are different types of, slum is a lot of people would say it's derogatory, a basti.
mm. Okay.
There are different types of settlements, right? There are some people who are literally living in a kacha house, which
Yeah.
they've sort of made with tarpaulin. There's some people who have two, three rooms, it'll have windows and stuff,
Yeah.
different levels. Anyway, we used to charge a nominal fee, so it's 300 rupees per month if you want to do this course, and you learn spoken English, you learn computer, soft skills, and then it's a 4 month course that basically trains you to work in the service sector, and
Yeah.
at the end of the course is with a job placement.
Yeah.
So there was one boy, and there were some families who were poor who couldn't afford that 350 or 400 rupees also. So to them, there was like a scholarship, but they have to pay something. They have to
Yeah.
pay like 100 or 50 rupees or something. So there was one boy where 2 months he hadn't paid his fee. So I kind of
Yeah.
said like, hey, what's this? You have to pay. And I actually went and visited his home, and his mother said, well, I've been sending the money, so where is it gone? And
Mm.
eventually we found that he had used that money to take a girl on a date and go eat pizza at Domino's.
Okay.
And to me, I was just like, he's so poor. Look at it, that they can't afford like they're eating one meal a day because they don't
Yeah.
have food on the table. And what is this boy doing?
Yeah.
And my boss just told me, like, he's doing what any 19-year-old would do. This is what people at 19 do. And people who are poor aren't different. They have the same aspiration. They may not have the resources. So you
Yeah.
don't have to be judgmental about it. I know that this is probably not the kind of example that you were looking for, but to
Yeah.
me, it sort of broke down this barrier of us and them, right?
Mm.
Why should he have this burden of, I mean, he does have an additional burden of needing to be responsible,
Yeah.
but it's the same for anyone that age. So I think
Yeah.
my approach to then counseling, I mean, I connected him with the counselor and she sort of like, talked to him about, approach, but it wasn't like, you're so poor, there's no food at home.
Mm.
Why would you waste money on this? It's recognized that all young people have, they want to have fun, they want to do
Yeah.
things. It's not like, having fun is not something that you need to be entitled to.
Mm.
So to me, that was something. And of course, I mean, to give you much more obvious examples, when I first went to the community, it was very surprising to me how people live. Like you're having a bath and eventually you clean and wait for that space to dry and you live in that same space.
Mm.
That itself was surprising. So many of our students actually in one or two colonies, depending on which part of the city they're in,
Yeah.
uh, they didn't even have toilets.
Mm.
So imagine like, growing up your whole life with not having a toilet in your home. You have
Mm.
to go somewhere else to bathe. You have to go somewhere else to, go to the loo, that kind of
Mm.
thing. That itself is a safety issue. So yeah, I think, but for me, this pizza example is something which I
Mm.
always remember because for me, it was like, it changed the way I approached my trainees also,
And now this kind of
kind of.
stuff doesn't bother you. It's like, yeah, whatever.
No, it's not, yeah, whatever. But it's
Mm.
just like, okay, I know it happens. Like, I don't
Mm.
have to be, there's no value. I'm not putting a judgment to it.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Do
I
you feel
just to
guilty?
answer,
Sorry,
for
what
what?
are you saying?
I
Just one.
didn't answer your question. I kind of like drifted off, but how do we keep ourselves going? Is I do think that finding good mentors, like making an effort to find people who can give guidance. So in that case, the way my boss gave me that input, you know,
Mm.
that was something which was sort of, yeah, it helped me. It kind of pushed me in the right direction. Also like pursuing certain hobbies. I think music was something that I always kept with because it was also an important way for me to make friends,
Mm.
connect with people. Um, and then, of course, I've always had a strong community in the church. So that's
Mm.
like something you do need something that refreshes you.
Yeah.
Because I do feel that sometimes it just you're asking me, do you feel guilty? Yes, that this
Yeah.
is something that I've grappled with all the time. Like, um,
What is the grapple you're doing? That you got lucky for no reason for your like for no. I mean, you just got born in the right circumstances, and
yeah,
then
I mean, that's
yeah.
the very first thing, but also like, small things like like being wanting to buy a certain type of clothing, spending on things like a pedicure,
Yeah.
some of my students there was once a student who looked at my hands and said like, you don't do any work at home, do you? So I said, no, I also wash my dishes. So he says, no, I can look at your hands and tell that you've never. So I mean, these are the things that people observe. So I used to feel guilty about, oh, like, should I not have manicured nails? Those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So these are very basic kind of things, but I feel like, I've gotten over those things. Of course, when you go to work in a community, I never had like fancy nails,
Yeah.
but it's also just having, like soft skin. It is
Yeah.
something that people observe and see. You don't work with your hands. And it's fine. I think you can just say, no, I don't. Or you can just say, I don't have to. I wash dishes for myself. I don't have to do it for my whole family.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you are normal about it, I think sometimes I feel like a lot of the problem was just in my head. I was feeling guilty. For the other person, it was just an observation. So a lot of the problem was with the way I was
Hmm. And how
thinking
did that
about things.
change? Like, what changed in your mind to make you feel less guilty about this stuff?
I had another mentor who said that, these problems these problems are beyond us.
Yeah.
And we don't need to really make it about ourselves. We're
Hmm.
kind of like just sort of catalysts maybe in the system or people who are trying to do things. But, I by myself can't do anything. I'm trying
Yeah.
to do something. So this is going to be a deterrent. You just put it out of your head. And one thing he told me was it needs to be a balance of being exacting and being indulgent. you don't always have to be, um, you know, uh, so hard on yourself all the time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Hmm.
I mean, what have you learned? Like, you spent a decade. People who do have privilege, or like people like me, who are lucky to be born in a certain circumstance, who,
People
said
like
that,
us.
people like us, who
Yeah.
said that, oh, I want to do this. And that was even an idea that I want to go do this. And we had the resources. And I mean, just like the ability to even say that I want to do this and can pursue it. Given how complex the problem of poverty and all of this is, how do you think people like us can help in a meaningful way? Like, what have you learned, or what do you think are ways wherein, yeah, you can help? Because I can imagine a lot of, like you said, I think you said in your voice note, a lot of donors are so like out of, I wouldn't say out of whack, but like they like they do not see what you guys see, and then they have a very different perception of what the real problem is. And it's like, oh, we throw money at the problem and the problem will get solved, but like such a complex problem, so maybe that is not the
Mhm.
way. But what have you learned about, or what do you think people can do, like normal people like me, uh to help the problem?
Well, I mean, generosity is one thing definitely. And I know that it's also kind of like com- I also think I learned through this journey how to be compassionate. Sometimes I felt like if I'd be nice to people, they'd take advantage of me.
Hmm.
And one of my mentors also did tell me that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because also what I learned about these communities is people are so competitive, right? Because they have
Yeah.
to compete for everything. Water, there's like a set time where the municipal government is going to provide water.
Hmm.
The water shortages. So if you have to stand in a long queue just to get water for the day, that's a very basic need. For food, everything you're always having to fight, you're going to be competitive.
Hmm.
Somewhere there's also this mentality of like, um, there's a sense of pride in sort of stealing or taking, and it comes from being poor for a long time, right? And being marginalized. So
Hmm.
I think like for me, I realized that you have to be smart about it also, but it doesn't
Hmm.
mean that I should stop showing compassion.
Hmm.
So for people like us, maybe I'd say like read about it, try to listen with when people are in this sector, try to listen to their experiences.
Hmm.
And also now, there is a lot of uh, evidence that is coming out. So it's not that it's all like just charity and there's no logic
Hmm.
to it. There is sort of an evidence-based approach to addressing these problems. We do
Hmm.
want to make investment cases for, poverty alleviation, but there are models that work.
Hmm.
There are people who are studying, and it's also a process of creating a new language and
Hmm.
new methods for studying and writing about these kinds of problems.
Hmm.
And also evaluating, because it's not going to go away in two ways, but maybe if you do a pilot for like a 4 or 5 year period, you can show some
Yeah.
tangible change. So I
Hmm.
think just like being aware, reading more about these issues, kind of, and exposing ourselves in any way that we can, those things are helpful.
Hmm.
So if you go to a place like I know that people who go to Mumbai, everyone wants to see Dharavi all the
Yeah.
time. So they have these walks, but one of the things that you learn on the walk is that Dharavi is a slum and it's a place of poverty, but it's also a place of like a lot of commerce and industry,
Yeah.
right? It's a place of business, and that's actually a kind of space that gives mobility to people who are poor. It allows
Hmm.
poor people to live in the city. It allows them to set up businesses. A lot of what people are doing, it counts as commercial activity. The kind of
Yeah.
taxes you have to pay, the compliance part of it is so complicated. But Dharavi,
Hmm.
because it's a gray area, legally it's a gray area,
Yeah.
people are able to leverage and find mobility in the city. So,
Yeah.
give agency. I think that's the thing. Don't look at people as bichara.
Hmm.
Have compassion, but also give people that agency, they're
Hmm.
not foolish or incapable.
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of breaking down our own, sort of barriers we have that creates us and then kind of divide. I
Hmm.
don't know if I've given you, I don't know if you're looking for one or two like actions to do, but
No, I mean, this is good to know, because I would say that I currently do not do a lot of charity. Um, and I think one of the big reasons is like I feel like a lot of charity is quote unquote inefficient. or
Yeah.
it's just like whatever. And then maybe that's an unfounded belief or whatever. I have that belief, but I'm like, hey, like if everybody thinks like me, then doing nothing is like, even if it's inefficient, it's 50% inefficient. Doing something is better than doing nothing, right? But
Hmm.
I guess I've never gotten around figuring out, hey, where should I donate or whatever things.
So, but I agree with you, Reuben, and which is why after my first 5 years in an NGO, I chose my next setup was with the government.
Yeah,
Because the government is not going to leave. The government
yeah,
does dip. I mean, the main source of income is the taxpayers' money,
yeah,
but the government's job is to provide services to people.
correct.
So for me, that was like an intentional trajectory, right? To know
Hmm.
how governments work, how do
Yeah,
policymakers think, and there's also a thing at scale. This problem is large, so we have to think about scale.
yeah,
We have to think of solutions that are sustainable.
yeah,
So what does strengthening government systems look like? I think
yeah,
the next 5 years was about that. And it
yeah,
was a very good opportunity because you mentioned like Roshni.
yeah,
That was like a what they call a technical support unit. So the
yeah.
UNICEF had set it up at a
Hmm.
college, which is also a government college, Lady Irwin College. It's part of
Hmm.
the Delhi University. They had set it up to give support to the Ministry of Rural Development for their program. And we were
Yeah.
supporting two particular areas, which is nutrition and gender
Hmm.
mainstreaming,
Yeah.
but into the poverty alleviation program because they realized that nutrition was or malnutrition was something that
Yeah.
keeps families in poverty. Um, Actually, this is, you asked me what does poverty look like and nutrition, I didn't go into it, but
Yeah.
nowadays, if you know, lots of people are talking about the first 1,000 days,
Hmm.
but it actually affects your brain development.
What is
Um,
first 1,000 days?
so the first 1,000 days is from the time like a woman is pregnant till the
Hmm.
child is 2 years old.
Hmm.
Those are like the most significant years in terms of a child's brain
Hmm.
development.
Hmm.
So if people don't have water or don't have a house, if a woman is pregnant during that time,
Yeah.
it is going to affect her and it's going to affect her
Yeah.
child, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, the quality of food that a woman eats actually has a long-standing
Hmm.
implications for the child, and it's what they call intergenerational poverty.
Yeah.
Malnutrition causes intergenerational
Yeah.
poverty because your children are not intelligent enough,
Yeah. Correct.
to take up jobs or do things. And so, yeah. Uh,
Okay.
Anyway, I work with government.
Hmm.
Now I currently work with something that's not government, but it's a cooperative.
Cooperate. Yeah. Okay.
So,
So
it's
maybe just to pull back, we were talking
Mhm.
about Kathputli. You said spend. I think you talked about Itasha, where you spend time um teaching or like in the skill development space or skilling programs. You
Mhm.
did Itasha for 4 years, wherein you sort of ran into the pizza guy. Um, I wonder if he's still with his girlfriend, but wo- I hope it will
I
work.
don't know. I mean, he was counseled and then he got a job. So the
Or
idea
he
was you get a job and then you,
then buy the
yeah,
pizza.
yeah.
Okay. So you did that for about 4 years. I think, and then I think, like you mentioned, you wanted to sort of see how it works at scale, and then you wanted to work at government. Before you actually joined Roshni, you did the Urban Fellow program. Why did you decide to do that? You've done 4 years in an NGO. Why did you decide to stop and move to this program?
So because I saw that there were so many interconnections like poverty. So this particular program, there was a lot of emphasis on understanding built environment, understanding things like planning.
Hmm.
Um, and I felt that the way cities are built or the way they are planned or just the kind of poverty you see in cities is much more acute. So I
Hmm.
wanted to sort of spend a year with people trained very differently, different from me, learning about how they think about the urban. Like when you meet architects, for them, like a city is a place with fancy buildings, right?
Yeah.
And that's what sort of is the pride of a city, like
Correct.
fancy markets and fancy buildings. So anyway, understand how different people think about the city, and just
Hmm.
that was a way for me to learn and gain skills to sort of address other
Hmm.
issues. You need to dialogue with people who are planners. You need to dialogue with people who are working with maybe the way transportation systems are designed,
mm,
what
mm,
is their lens and who
yeah,
is their customer, right? If
mm,
the key customer they're thinking about is a certain class of people, then
yeah,
where are the other people going to go? And the
mm,
government has to cater to everyone. The government
mm,
cannot decide that the private sector maybe can do that, but the
yeah,
government has to cater to everyone. So I wanted to learn like different perspectives and how people are trained really. Our education trains us to think
mm.
in certain ways. So
Was
yeah.
there one big thing you took away or something which you remember from that 11 months that you walked away with?
Yeah, I learned how people who are trained as planners and architects how they think. I'm not
How was it different from how you were thinking? Do you have an
so I,
example?
I think for us like in the social sciences we tend to be a lot more process oriented. In
Mm,
sociology, like basically at B school we are trained in a method called ethnography,
yeah,
which is basically very, very deep understanding of a community through immersion in that community and,
yeah,
repeated engagement. For the architect, it's just like, okay, this is the space. I need to make the building, and it's a little more goal output oriented.
yeah,
For us, it's more about process. So that's important to have sort of a balance of the two. I mean, that's
yeah,
one thing in terms of my behavior, but also then understanding certain things about built environment itself, right?
mm,
And also, how do you assess built environment?
mm,
So for instance, if I want to understand how a family living a particular type of house is at risk,
mm,
now after doing the Urban Fellows program, I look at the space very differently. I gained a vocabulary for it, right? I
mm,
can see what are the sources of lighting, what are the sources of ventilation, what is the space, the living space that they have,
mm,
what are the norms. So every city has a building code, a bylaw basically through which
mm,
every home has to be built, and everything
mm,
that's not like that is kind of like it's an illegal or an informal kind of settlement. So I
mm,
gained that language and that the vocabulary. So if I have to
mm,
debate or talk, even have dialogue with someone from a planning background, I have the vocabulary for it. I may not have the skills to do their work, but I
yeah,
understand when they talk. Um, Another thing which maybe a lot of people who are trained in social sciences will understand is that I think for us, for people who are trained in these engineering and especially architecture,
yeah,
it was very common for people to say that we worked the whole night, and
yeah,
someone, our professor, just threw our project out and said, "This is rubbish. Do it again." And for us, like if someone says it's very bad, it's like it takes us so long to bounce back, and that
yeah,
that Uh, uh, so for me, actually, something that held me in good stead is when you go to government offices, it's not like people are very polite and saying, "Oh, thank you for your suggestions." A lot of even the civil servants you meet, I mean, they talk like one trader from Chutney talk. Like again, not to be racist, but
yeah,
it's like one guy chewing pan. I mean, it's not the kind of treatment that you find respectful,
yeah,
the kind of treatment, and it's rude. Often people don't have the time. People are really impatient and they'll just say, get out.
yeah,
If you're lucky, they'll not swear at you. But to build a thick skin and to keep trying, you
mm,
asked what keeps you going. I think
yeah,
interacting with people who don't take things personally, for me, that was a big change, right? And for us, like we keep working at it and it needs to be perfect. And I won't say social sciences, but a lot of us who work in
mm,
maybe arts or who have this little needing to be perfect, that kind of thing. And if someone says it's bad
mm,
or doesn't give us criticism in a soft sort of way, it hurts us so much and
yeah,
you're not able to bounce back. But yeah, interact with these students, they are trained like that. Because when they work, their world of work involves dealing with builders, dealing with all kinds
mm,
of clients and stuff. They need to have that training. But for me, that was something that, it always stayed with me. I used to feel
mm,
very bad initially if someone would shout and say, get out. And it's not just government. Even the donor I would work with was a very rude person. But
mm,
then I realized, like, she's not attacking me. It's just
mm.
because the problem is not, or I'm not being more goal oriented. So I think mindset change, that was something that I took
Mm.
away. Mm.
Do you tell people now to get out?
No, I don't tell people to get out, but I've been told that I'm very intimidating and scary. I try not to, but I think if you spend too much time with a certain type of people, you kind of imbibe some of their qualities. So I'm trying to
Yeah,
unlearn a lot of toxic kind of behaviors, which I even sort of may have internalized from the government setup. But I don't tell
Hmm.
people to get out. And if I
Hmm.
am rude, I am short tempered, I make it
Hmm.
a point to say sorry.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess
Don't let
you're
me
not
and
doing
say
it.
sorry.
You're not like doing it personally, right? Like you said, if somebody's saying something to you, it's not like a personal attack. It's just you have too much to do. So I guess maybe I don't know if it justifies you doing it either, but
Not true. It does happen, but there's no harm in just saying,
yeah,
I'm sorry. Like, I think a genuine sorry does go a long way. In some spaces, it could be seen as someone as weakness.
yeah,
But I think for some people, like, it really helps them, connect. The idea is not to hurt people, especially if you're
yeah,
like in a team. Yeah, you don't want to demotivate the others you're working with.
yeah. Okay. So you did that fellowship. You then worked at the government. I'm curious to know. It was a 5-year engagement, like whatever program. You did a bunch of stuff around skills and nutrition. Do you remember what is the most challenging part of the entire experience? Maybe apart from government officials telling you to F off. Mm.
um, I think like a difference in pace.
Mm.
I think like when I joined that project, to me, like I was given papers, academic,
Yeah,
papers, and stuff, which sort of establishes a very clear link between nutrition and poverty. But
yeah,
the government people that I was dealing with, for them, those links weren't obvious.
yeah,
And to me, very naively saying, but these papers say this. But, a lot of government officials say, well, all kinds of people are always writing papers. If I change
yeah,
my program based on anything that anyone is writing, we're not going to be able to work.
yeah,
Um, uh, so I feel like sometimes we do want to bring change, and at the same time, the donor is giving you money to do certain things, right? And they're
yeah.
investing in a particular kind of intervention. But this idea of सबको साथ लेकर के चलना,
Mm.
I think that is something which I found challenging because everyone is always on a different, they're at a different level.
Yeah.
So you may be very, very advanced in your thinking, but to bring the change, you need to wait for everyone to reach that
Mm.
level. And it's not that people don't. I mean, even those government officials who weren't listening, it wasn't like they weren't trying to do. They wanted to. They were very invested in really promoting livelihoods for women. They wanted to see the kind of
Mm.
economic empowerment happen. It's just that they weren't convinced.
Mm.
So I think convincing again and again, and actually that's how policy making, or if we want to do policy advocacy, that's how
Mm.
it works. You keep trying till you find the right moment.
Mm.
Suddenly something changes and the priority changes. And a lot of these things with government, it's also like political will drives a lot of things.
Yeah.
Elections drive a lot of things. So you need to always have your data and your evidence ready.
Mm.
When the time comes, you need to be ready with that elevator pitch where you just
Yeah.
present it.
Mm.
And just to also come back to you, you were saying you don't find it a very efficient kind of thing.
Mm.
Donors do think like that. And I
Yeah.
think even for academia, I mean, we're doing advocacy with the government, but we're also
Yeah.
doing advocacy with researchers saying,
Yeah.
hey, produce research that's useful for this space. So
Mm.
lots of investors, big investors like the World Bank, big donors like, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they want to know how much does it cost,
Yeah.
right? If you're saying invest in, say, crashes for women,
Yeah.
you're saying that if you have crashes, women will go to work, they'll feel comfortable going to work, knowing that their child is safe. But what is it going to cost for me if we
Yeah.
have to set these up all over the country? We need that evidence. We need
Yeah.
to know what is the impact, what is the kind of training that is needed, and what is the kind of outcomes that you see. How is it
Yeah.
impacting the life of the woman and the child? We need evidence, so we invest in that. So
Yeah.
there are now people doing those kinds of studies, doing
Yeah.
costing studies to make and at scale to make investment cases for these things, but also working with um, these academic institutions, kind of sort of educating them on,
Mm.
um, you know, uh, because it's not like you're doing it in a lab.
Correct.
You can't control a lot of factors. So how
Yeah.
you document things, that kind of constant negotiation and back and forth, where you're always grappling with people who think well, this is not scientific. This is not
Yeah.
scientific. Well, here you're in the real world. People are complex. It's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
you tell someone you should go wash your hands. They're going to go wash their hands,
Yeah.
right? Behaviors take time. So anyway, that kind of education here, and with at the same time, I mean, you're always left feeling like this is such a thankless job. Everyone is
Yeah.
telling me to F off.
Yeah.
But when you keep doing it, I think people also or stakeholders also take time to sort of have realizations.
Yeah.
And after 4 or 5 years, you are seeing people invest in those things. So it takes time, but you build the vocabulary, you build the evidence, and then you're able to
Mm.
make a case for it. But it's a hard journey. I know most of my friends have changed jobs 1.5
Mm.
years, 2 years, and a lot of it is about jumping. You get a pay jump,
Yeah.
right, each time you do. But for me, it was like I wanted to see a certain policy thing through.
Yeah.
So I was lucky to be in at the right place at the right time, but also be able to see whatever inputs we're giving get adopted and implemented in government systems.
Yeah.
And
This was
see,
during Roshni. Yeah.
yeah, so
Mm.
change the mindset of the people who are doing research, change the mindset of donors, change the mindset of government. I mean, because it's
Mm.
not me alone. We
Yeah.
worked in interdisciplinary teams, and of course, there are different people. Like there are people in different places of power who play strategic roles. But how do you
Mm.
influence that? Yeah.
So we'll come back to the NRLM stuff, but I want to know your view on donors. What do you think drives donors? They part with all of this money. Um, what do you think like motivates donors to just give away money?
I think everyone has a mandate, and the mandate is something that comes from outside. Right now, donors want access, I think. And there are different kinds of donors. So, the donors I'm referring to are not like individual donors like you and me. The donors I'm talking about are the World Bank, like the World Bank is a bank, but like the Bill and Melinda Gates
Yeah.
Foundation, the UNICEF, they've been set up and they've been given a certain mandate.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what drives the whole machinery. Like you
But
said,
like, why the mandate? Like, why do you think they get? Like, the closest I've heard is there are basically there are three ways of solving any problem in the world. There is markets, there is government, and wherever these two fail, there is a small sliver called philanthropy.
Okay.
And it and that's sort of the people who are mostly in who have gone down the market route realize that there are some problems which markets will just not solve
Okay.
because the time horizon is too large or whatever. And therefore, because these are quote unquote problem solvers, the way they see that, hey, the way to solve this problem is philanthropy, and
Hmm.
therefore they donate, and they will put money because at the core of it is the same motivation of why I want to solve a problem. And a lot of these people are post like money, like I think you don't really care about the money anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I really want
Yeah.
to solve this problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I have. I think this was some talk between Bill Gates and somebody else, and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like that,
Mhm.
the governments can solve certain problems, markets can solve certain problems, and then the ones which do not get solved by the two, you got to do philanthropy and solve them. But I'm curious to know yeah, because if everybody believes that they don't work well, there's nobody can really agree on how to do it.
Yeah.
Why am I wasting why am I just like putting money on fire and
No,
just
no.
giving all these so much money to these
No,
people?
no, and I think that they never give away so much to people. All donors have very stringent requirements of evidence creation.
Uh,
And there's a whole, uh, new stream of work called monitoring, evaluation, and learning that that's coming up because donors also expect people to be accountable. Like giving money,
yeah,
you have to have proper project monitoring in place.
yeah,
You have to generate some kind of evidence. But I think I've never heard of this framing, but it really does make sense. And a lot of the positions, a lot of the projects that I've been involved in are actually a problems which maybe markets can solve to some
yeah,
extent. It's about creating conducive environments in the markets for a certain type of people to also enter in and
yeah.
giving them that support system to work there. So, yeah, maybe, I mean, I don't know I think the leadership is who decides. And
Mm,
philanthropy is essentially set up by people who are post money, as you say.
Yeah.
So the HCL Foundation will have something. Azim Premji Foundation will have something.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but at the end of the day, it is about solving a problem.
Mm.
Even when you apply for a grant, you have to have very clearly articulated what is your problem
Yeah.
statement, what is the solution you're proposing, and how is it going to work, and how do you propose to monitor the change, and how can we measure that change?
Yeah.
So it is, yeah, you're right. It's about solving a problem.
I mean, you worked in government for what, 5 years. You also mentioned that you wanted to see that you had got a very left leaning education, and then you wanted to see what maybe a more capitalistic solution could look like. You started doing some journalists with ASOCHAM,
Yeah,
ASHOCHAM.
yeah.
What have you learned about all of this? What have you learned about what governments need to do, what markets cannot do, at least when it comes to all this poverty elevation stuff?
I mean,
Have you learned anything?
I don't think I have any kind of one sentence sort of learnings about these things. But for me, that ASOCHAM, when I did it, I wanted to really, I never understood the logic of
Hmm,
what is driving, certain corporates. Like, how do they think? Like, why are they not
hmm,
understanding that this is a problem?
hmm,
But then I realized that actually it is largely a lens of efficiency,
hmm.
right? And how they view efficiency is also different. So they're trying to solve, and I think for me it was a learning of that they're trying to solve a certain type of problem.
Hmm.
And things like poverty alleviation just don't fall in certain people's problems. So they don't care about it because they don't need to care about it.
Yeah.
And through that, I just came to terms with it. That
Hmm.
what I did realize is that if you do want to get someone to care of it, you have to speak their language. You
Yeah.
have to create an incentive for them to create. Everyone works in terms of incentives. So how do you
Yeah.
if you want to bring such the private sector to the table on something, you need to create an
Yeah.
incentive for them.
Yeah.
Another thing I did learn is in every sort of setup, there'll be one outlier.
Hmm.
So maybe you don't care about certain, maybe issues like poverty or,
Yeah.
you think it's inefficient, but in your office, there's probably one or two people who do. So for
Yeah.
me, I will tackle the one or two people who do
Hmm.
strategically. I'll tackle them. I'd hope that they caring about these things look cool. And
Hmm.
then I'd hope that everyone will sort of jump on that bandwagon and will want to contribute. So that's the way
Hmm.
I've understood you work with the private sector. Don't expect too many things or people, you can't tell people a sob story. And there's no need to tell a
Yeah.
sob story. My things have discharged. Has the sound changed?
Yeah. It's changed a little bit, but I can hear you.
Is it going to affect the,
No, I think it's okay. There's an echo might creep in, but if it is, then we can figure it out.
yeah,
It's okay for now.
yeah. Yeah, so I think
Okay, so you
that's
don't.
what I
Hmm.
understood. Like, how do you create the incentive? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how you.
With everything you're saying, you would fit into enterprise sales very, very well.
Oh wow,
And
maybe that's
enterprise sales works exactly the same. Like everybody doesn't care about what you're trying to sell
yeah.
them. You got to find the 1 2 people who really care about it, get them to champion what you're doing, and then over like maybe a 2 year period, you actually break in. So it's not very different.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's
sh-
glad to know. I guess now my way of thinking about social issues is also probably becoming more and more efficient, right? More.
yeah, it is exactly like if somebody asked me, hey, Reuben, how would you close a deal, or say what is one of the most complex deals you've led closed, which has taken a long period of
Mhm.
time? It's the same story. Like you got to tell them the same things again and again. Find different angles what
Yeah,
they care about. Different people care about different things, and then suddenly, out of the blue, everything suddenly lines up because something external has happened, and then you got to be ready. Like my boss used to tell me, just be ready. Like be ready to be the first one to catch the apple as soon as it
oh
falls.
yeah,
So be around,
yeah,
yeah, be around the tree. You don't know when the apple's going to fall, but you better be sure you're close enough. So when it falls, you jump and catch it.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I guess similar. Um, okay, totally unrelated. We will shift gears. You mentioned that you had community through church. I've known you for a while. You've been very religious, I would say.
Mhm.
Over the past decade, has your relationship with religion, or what have you learned about religion, which maybe is new over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think. As we
Because
grow.
actually, maybe to add also, the reason I'm asking this is because I do remember Neha and I would have some of these conversations. Neha's a very critical person. I wouldn't say you can't tell Neha bullshit. Um, so my sort of big, I would say, criticism or my big questions with religion have been around, I think is they're trying to, I feel
Mhm.
it's sort of peddling bullshit. And you see, like, you believe it, you have believed it for all this time. So I'm curious to know, what have you learned
Mhm.
about religion after all these years?
So, one thing that I feel is like, so I'm a practicing Christian.
Mm,
And I think what I've come to appreciate over time was what my reasons for staying with the faith is that I feel there is a sort of um, consistency in terms of argument across the
mm,
Bible.
mm,
And the Bible doesn't claim to be a scientific text. It is sort of the arguments or the way of plain, and it is supernatural. So there
mm,
are things like Jesus is walking on water. There are things
mm,
like we do believe that Jesus was born to a virgin. So it is
mm.
supernatural. And Jesus, I mean, God Himself is a supernatural being. So
Yeah.
there's no claim to it. But at the same time, I do feel that across the text, they're all like indicating across prophecies over thousands of years are hinting to a same uh, to one event and one thing which
Mm,
is the basis of the whole faith, which is
mm,
Jesus's death on the cross
mm,
and the sacrifice that was done for humanity.
mm,
And to me, like I think over time, I have realized that a lot of and not to criticize other religions, but a lot of world views in general can be very,
mm.
you pray and something good happens to you. It's like that. But this is kind of
Yeah.
more sacrificial. And to
Mm,
see like the God or the key deity, the person we worship,
mm,
having that kind of value where you die, even though the people are like people who he was dying for, humans
mm,
like us maybe don't deserve it. Without us
mm,
even saying sorry, someone thought it
mm,
important enough to die for us, just
mm,
so that we can always have a connection with him. I think to me
mm,
that is something that I've found beautiful.
mm,
And it's just that consistency across biblical text of pointing to this. This is the basis of the religion. For me,
mm,
that is something that has my understanding of that has grown stronger with time.
mm, mm,
So which is why I also had a lot of questions about, and I think in that sense I've been lucky to have good teachers.
mm,
I think I was always a rebel figure in most of the churches that I've been to.
mm,
But I've had good teachers who sort of, not had a problem with my questions.
mm,
And a lot of the time that we also have to recognize, like a lot of us who grow up in Christian homes, a lot of the teaching
mm,
that we receive, a lot of it is actually the interpretations of the people who are teaching us, and often
mm,
they're kind of communicating their own values and their own judgment. But
mm,
again, importantly, I had good teachers who taught me to read biblical texts, and even my training
mm,
in history. I think my training in history and sociology have really helped me so much.
mm,
Because I read scripture like it is a historical text. What
mm,
is it telling us about the society of that time? What
mm,
what were we learning? Why are the Israelites behaving or reacting the way they are? I think it's
mm,
really only made my journey of learning with the Bible a lot richer. Um,
mm.
yeah, and
Do you read the texts as factual truths, or do you read them with the lens of, like, you would read a storybook which has a very important moral, and you're like, hey,
I read it
I
factual
actually,
truths.
oh,
Yeah,
you read it as a factual
yeah,
truth, not as a storybook
no,
which has
no.
important morals.
And
Okay.
here's the other thing I want to say. My training in sociology has actually helped so much because there's so many things. You read the book of Judges, it's so violent. And
Mm,
you see this kind of violence in a biblical text and in a
mm,
scriptural book, a book which is supposed to teach you how to be good, right? But
yeah.
it's also not I mean, it's writing about the society and the time the way it was. So
Yeah.
I think my training in sociology and history have helped me to appreciate those things. Um,
Mm,
Actually, in my second year of sociology, I became very, very interested in religions, and my master's thesis is also actually about Sikh women, Sikh
mm,
women who wear the turban. So I think my own
mm,
religious practice has made me so curious about other faiths also, and I've always taken a keen interest in learning about other religions too. But yeah, I to answer,
mm,
I do believe they're actual truths. Um,
mm.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I would say the closest I've come to is I think they are like very wise stories which with morals which probably tend to universal truths if they exist. But yeah, I think like just like more, and maybe this is more of the Catholic faith. I don't know. Is if you take it too far and try to believe that it is factual, it I mean it goes a bit too extreme. And then I mean I see why. I can see why you would want to do that, and then it's much more than spirituality and faith. It's more around organization and governments and other stuff.
yeah.
Um.
No, I
So
completely
so
agree
yeah.
with the things that you're saying, and I don't think it's something that only Catholics do. I think, like I was saying, a lot of sometimes with time, people sort of convolute what is actually sort of
Yeah.
there with their own sort of ideas. So actually,
Yeah.
finding a community in which you are able to grow is also really important. So I
Mm,
actually kind of rebelled and left the church that my parents
mm,
have gone to and that I went to for all of my life, actually, since I was
mm,
8 till the time I was in college. I left, and after I came back from Bangalore, to me it
mm,
was really annoying the way uh, sometimes Christians are so indifferent to what is happening in the world, or I at
mm,
least felt the church that I was going to, there wasn't enough people who are politically inclined or informed.
mm,
Not that
mm.
every Sunday you have to be discussing politics. It's not that,
Yeah.
but it is important to be well informed. Just because you're
Yeah.
comfortable, it's not okay to not know about anything else. But
Yeah.
I found a church that I went to, which is actually a city church, and
Mm,
it's non-denominational. So we have
mm,
traditionally Protestant and Catholic are the two denominations. This is a city
mm.
church, and the idea,
What does that mean? What does city church
yeah,
mean?
it is. Uh, it's a non-denominational church that caters to people who have grown up in cosmopolitan settings. So people like you and me who
Oh,
are skeptics, who have read,
got
who
it.
are
Got
well
it.
read, and that's their target audience. They want to get, and it needs to be. I think at some point, the youth group that I was in, they were constantly saying, "Don't smoke, don't drink, don't have orgies." Well, I'm not doing, I'm not doing any of
This is
these
very
things.
sad. You don't have origin.
No, for me, it's all about
Yeah.
being. I'm not doing any of those things. So what is it? What is the input that you're giving me that actually helps me
Yeah.
be useful or is helping me cope
Correct.
with the kind of you know a lot of the women also who were my teachers had never worked in their lives, and
Yeah.
no uh, and it's not to criticize them, but I do feel that yeah, at some point I wanted a community where there were people who had exposure, where there were women who had
Yeah.
work, so that
Yeah.
I get the right kind of input. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Do not have orgies. Wow. Okay. Let's say we go back to where you are now.
Yeah.
You're currently in Ahmedabad. You moved to Ahmedabad to work at this organization called SEWA. Um, I think you were attracted to it because of the power of collectives. What is a collective? How do you explain it to a 5-year-old?
It's just a group of people who come together for a common interest.
And why are they so powerful?
Um, well, they can act as a pressure group.
Um,
It's also a medium for learning from each other. It's a
um,
way of getting information. So one person has a phone, maybe they learn something new. It's a way for them to share with each other.
um,
That's something. Many collectives are important vote banks now, so they are
um,
able to, like I said, pressure group. My first point.
yeah,
Um, Also, I might not have money, but if
yeah,
I have 20 other people with me or 100 other people with me who are all putting in a certain amount of money, it's a way for me to kind of build capital.
Yeah.
So I get access to a kind of credit. And a lot of the
Mm.
collectives that we see, which have worked in the context where I've worked for poverty alleviation, have been about
Yeah.
making credit accessible to women. There
Mm.
are different kinds of collectives. I mean, even men, farmers you have farmer producer organizations. I mean, there are different kinds of collectives, but this is something, it's a
Yeah.
common interest. Membership is based on some kind of monetary
Mm.
input that people are regularly giving to build a kind of
Mm.
corpus fund that keeps
Mm.
growing, an
Mm.
investment fund that keeps growing. I also like have people with whom I can share the risk. So if I want to
Mm.
try something new, I don't have to do it by myself. I can do it with five, six other people. As you know, we've
Mm.
come together from the start with a common interest, so we can share
Yeah.
the load, so to speak, and share the risk.
Yeah.
If I'm a poor woman, maybe going to the market where there are all these men, it's
Mm.
daunting for me to go by myself. Uh, Not even men, if there are people who are richer than me, for me to make a space for myself, there'll always be people trying to compete. I won't stand alone, but if there's three or four women with me, maybe together
Yeah.
we can hold our ground and we can be competitive too.
Yeah.
So that's the power of collectives.
Mm. You decided that this was going to be a quote unquote niche, and this is the thing you wanted to write about.
Yeah.
Like, how did you arrive at that?
So, yeah, the program that I was doing even in NRLM was a collective based program.
Yeah.
And to me, I was really taken by the kind of leaders, women leaders I met in rural communities.
Mm.
And it's not that their aspirations are, of course, they want good things for their children, their family, but the idea is not just to get ahead. And
Mm.
it's not that these women were not competitive. They would also
Mm.
compete within the collective, but somewhere at the
Mm.
core of it was this philosophy that if I can make it, all of my sisters, it's like a sisterhood. It's a very feminist kind of an
Mm.
institution. The organizations
Mm.
I'm talking about draw from feminist philosophy in the way they are structured.
Mm.
But if
Mm.
I can make it, my sisters can make it too, and together we will move ahead. Now,
Mm.
maybe when I say this, we have a very romanticized picture of, women working together, and,
Mm.
it's really not like that. Women do compete with each other.
Mm.
And if you've been poor all your life, and always, in a position where others don't want to see you get
Yeah.
ahead, you kind of also internalize those exact behaviors, right? As they
Mm.
say, historians will know of this term subaltern.
Mm.
When the subaltern also gains power, they kind of also imbibe some of the behaviors of the oppressor.
Mm.
And that's normal. I think as humans we compete. It's fine. But somewhere there is a belief like I am earning money, but it's not just about accumulating a lot of wealth. I also want to
Mm.
create jobs. And
Mm.
to me, it was really eye-opening to see that there are people, even poor people, and all kinds of people who do have this philosophy. I can get ahead, but there
Mm.
are other people who I can take with me, and that to me is my um, to me, that's an incentive. That's something that keeps me going. So that's something that I thought was really powerful. It's
Mm.
also not easy to set up these kinds of collectives. We live in a
Mm.
world which is really market oriented. It's very
Yeah.
individualistic. So even forming these kinds of collectives and establishing that kind of mindset is itself there's a technique to it, and it's
Mm.
sort of a tacit learning which people who have been involved in this programming know about. And when you
Mm.
mentioned I want to write about it, I do want to write about it because I feel like it's all tacit learning that always
Mm.
gets captured in the form of anecdotes. But
Mm.
if you can do the same thing, if you can create collectives in different parts of the world, in different points in time, it means
Mm.
you do have a technique, right? If you're able to
Yeah.
replicate again and again, it's just no one has written about it, no one has developed the vocabulary to write about it. So I
Mm.
do feel it's a new area. It's been collective based programming has been effective in poverty alleviation all across these countries which were colonized. So you see them in Bangladesh in a big way. You see them in India. India has the largest poverty alleviation program in the world, the NRLM, where I used to work.
Mm. Mm.
Collectives were big in Latin America. They've been you know, yeah, like I say, the post-colonial world, what now people call the global South. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
these countries do see a unique kind of poverty because the drain of wealth and resources was
Yeah.
is big. I mean, it's difficult for everyone to sort of come out of that. And these also have large economies which are really dependent on, I mean, their economies are really dependent on an informal sector. They have a large
Yeah.
informal workforce. So in these
Mm.
kinds of things, collectives are catalysts where you're not just working with one person at a time, you're working with
Yeah.
50, 500 people at a time, and you're creating leaders.
Mm.
Leaders who have that mindset that let's not just accumulate but also create jobs. And I think
Yeah.
now when there's no employment, when unemployment, all of these things are issues that everyone is grappling with. I do feel
Mm.
that this kind of mindset is something that even even in the corporate world, the private sector, that's the kind of mindset that could actually,
Yeah.
maybe if job creation was a problem that everyone was trying to solve,
Mm.
rather than seeing how I can get richer, maybe
Yeah.
economies could do more for citizens. Anyway, so
Mm.
that's what attracted me to it, and that's why I want to write about it. So I've joined SEWA, which is actually a pioneer in collectives. You mentioned it is the largest trade union in India
Yeah.
of informal workers.
Mm.
So I'm working with SEWA is a very large organization. It has a presence in 19 states. I'm working with the wing of SEWA that specializes in forming cooperatives.
Mm. Creating
Yeah,
cooperatives.
developing cooperatives. So cooperatives are a type of enterprise, a collective enterprise
Ah, yes.
also. Um, just yeah, like maybe I'll tell you a bit about. We've come out of the trade union movement. So SEWA has its origins in Ahmedabad, where
Yeah.
this was like the Manchester of the world. There were cotton
Mm.
mills that used to run here, and the work conditions were not great.
Yeah.
So SEWA was the first that helped women like recognize their rights and help them, advocated for their rights.
Yeah.
But once women started asking for their rights, managers didn't want to hire them.
Yeah.
So these women said, "Fine, we have these skills. We'll form our own enterprises."
Yeah.
Fish workers formed, and it's not only cotton workers. There are people who are agriculture workers, fish vendors,
Mm.
vegetable vendors, milk collectives, people who have
Mm.
cows and collect milk, dairy, not milk, dairy cooperatives.
Mm.
Um, so eventually they needed a kind of support system which would help them form business plans, help them with
Yeah.
compliance. I think at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if you have to register a company, the kind of
Yeah.
legal paperwork and stuff is daunting for someone who's uneducated, not even literate.
Yeah.
How do you give access to credit? None of the banks refuse to give any of these businesses
Yeah.
credit. So SEWA, actually, their first cooperative is actually the SEWA Bank. And the
Mm.
founder, Ela Bhatt, has actually written a book called We Are Poor, but We Are So Many. But it's about
Mm.
how like 10,000 women together put together 10 rupees and how they created that huge corpus so that all poor women could have access to some credit to
Mm.
start something. So the
Mm.
point is that these are like collective businesses where women are the
Mm.
managers. They are owned by women and women are managers, and all of the people who are part of the cooperative are shareholders.
Mm.
So, when you meet these leaders of cooperatives, you see the mindset. For them, it is like, okay, I have 40 members, I need to create work. I need to keep creating work consistently for these 40 people,
Mm.
that's the kind of mindset to leadership. So I'm learning
Mm.
a lot about that. I get to work with people who have actually gone village to village and formed cooperatives.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, and helped women make business plans, helped women sort of evolve, adapt their businesses through changing times. I mean, markets change also, it's
Yeah.
competitive. Um, you know, uh, Strengthen market linkages, look at how
Mm.
informal workers can market their products better.
Mm.
Now there's pressure to sell online.
Mm.
So how can these women learn digital skills so that they can sell their products online?
Mm.
So yeah, a lot of experiments
Got
that
it.
have happened, but I hope to kind of learn the science and technique
Mm.
of it, so to speak.
Mm. So you got interested in this whole poverty piece back in Rajasthan, and then eventually you came down to the conclusion that collectives are a good way to sort of solve it, and that sort of SEWA is what it's been doing for a while, and cooperatives are just like an entity type where people who are a collective eventually maybe form
Yeah,
a
it's an
cooperative. And
advanced type of
got it,
collective where they're running a
got it.
business. Yeah.
Amul is a cooperative business,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Yes.
Correct. And Mother Dairy too, if I'm not wrong.
I don't know if that's
Mother Dairy,
cooperative. Yeah,
yeah,
but the
I
idea
think,
is that they keep it functions in a way like a
yeah,
cooperative. Yeah. But Amul is the
hmm,
biggest example of a cooperative. Yeah.
cooperative. And then I guess the ambition is there can be maybe 10, 15, 20 more Amuls if the whole cooperative business works out.
Yeah. I don't know if that this organization aspires to become like an Amul. Uh,
Hmm,
uh, but another thing here is that actually the focus is on building women leaders, giving women a lot of
hmm,
exposure. So a lot of my
hmm,
colleagues um, have been to so many countries. They've come out of the movement. So their parent would have
hmm,
been a mill worker who
hmm,
had not studied more than sixth standard. A lot of them are first
hmm,
generation college goers. But the
hmm,
organization prioritized giving them exposure so that their
hmm,
mindset could change. And actually, something important that I haven't mentioned in this whole conversation is coming out of poverty is actually a mindset change. If your parent is a
hmm,
daily wage worker or you grew up in a home where it's just a hand to mouth existence, you don't
hmm,
think 10 years down the line, what am I going to do? You don't even have the
hmm,
ability to think like that. No one
hmm,
has ever asked you, what are you good at? So you don't have
hmm,
confidence. You don't recognize what your skill is.
hmm,
Right? I recently met some people in Nagaland, from Nagaland, and they were looking at setting up collective businesses
hmm.
with like women farmers in Nagaland, and they were saying women feel so guilty selling their produce. They don't,
Why?
yeah, it's just they don't see it as something to sell. This is just what we do. This is not an economic activity. So when the women from SEWA go to these geographies and train, they say that, women in SEWA don't feel shy about asking for money. And that's a skill you need to
Hmm,
learn from us. We are smart about money. And anyway, that's
hmm,
something that, you know, if you have a 10-year vision, you're able to make the kind of investments, monetary investments and investments in yourself and your skills to reach where you want to be 10 years from now. Just
yeah.
having that vision sets you up to have that kind of
Hmm.
mobility. Uh, uh,
And what in your experience is required to make them change that vision? Like it's just like, hey, I'm sure it's not like please think 10 years in the future. Compounding is a great thing. Show them some numbers. They probably don't get it. But like what have you like how do you change? What
so
has worked?
a part of it is doing that, and people do get it. Not everyone gets it, but like I said, there are always in any group there will be some women who are good at numbers and who do get it.
Yeah.
But it's also like it's constant reiteration. I mean, like how
Hmm.
you deal with the investors, you have to also create an incentive for a poor person to want to come. Everyone wants to come out of poverty, but it's too risky.
Yeah.
So there's
It's too risky.
it's too risky. Yeah. So I
What
think
does that mean? Why would it be too risky to get out of poverty?
no,
You're
so it's
already
too
in poverty.
risky to kind of change what you're doing, right? My
Got it.
concern is what am I going to eat tonight? What's my family going to eat tonight? Rather than let me put my money here and see it grow. So it is a lot of mindset change. It is actually a lot of what we call visioning exercises. Visioning
Hmm.
exercises is actually essentially just getting people to dream and think, hey, what do you want to, where do you see yourself and your family or your community in 20 years from now?
Yeah.
And breaking it down into steps. I think that's the biggest
Hmm.
thing, right? Small milestones. It's too daunting to think about 10 years
Yeah.
from now, but like any business, you think about tiny milestones. So for women, it's like that also. So we set up our first shop. We'll sell maybe 3 or 4 products. These will be our customers. Also along the way, constant skilling,
Hmm.
right? So one of our farming cooperatives, which is it's called the Megha Mandali, and ours meaning
Hmm.
Seva has promoted it. It's
Hmm.
in the southern part of Gujarat, in a place called
Hmm.
Tapi, and it's a tribal women's cooperative. Recently, those women would wanted to start a business where they sell seeds for paddy
Hmm.
as a business.
Hmm.
They were taught how to use Kobo Collect, which is a data
Hmm.
collection software.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of did a survey. The women themselves did a survey of 3,000 farmers. And with that information, knowing what type of seeds, do they want hybrid seeds? There are a couple of different types of paddy that you get. Knowing what the customer preferences was, they made their
Mm-hmm.
business plans. They kind of, procuring that amount of seed is challenging,
Mm-hmm.
but because they had that information, that data ready, there was no risk of like huge inventories, right? They procured an amount that they were sure that they were going to sell, and they increased their turnover from 5 lakhs to 18 lakhs in the first one cropping season, and in the next cropping season they were able to get a turnover of 35 lakhs.
Wow.
Right? But just giving them that small scale of, hey, show and showing them, right? You collect this data and you use the data to make your business plan. This is what corporates,
Mm-hmm.
anyone who's running a business needs to do, right? Someone
Yeah.
needs to be with the post, so kind of demonstrating and hand holding with
Mm-hmm.
people who don't have the exposure to see it. This
Yeah.
can happen, and now because they've done it for two cropping season, there's a confidence, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
confidence that we can do it. It's not going to be so risky. And
Yeah.
they have, slowly there's an openness to now expand.
Yeah.
Another really important element is that the federation, the SEWA, the organization the
Mm-hmm.
cooperative federation is always there behind them. So
Yeah.
they hit a time when they are in losses or there's a struggle. This organization offers working capital to them. They'll give them a loan,
Mm-hmm.
which will be like a very minimum interest loan. The
Yeah.
moratorium period is kind of flexible. They do return it, and we have evidence that show that people, I mean, these kinds of collectives do return it. But that
Yeah.
having access and knowing that they have hand-holding support and things like working capital accessible to them, that itself gives confidence. So all of these
Mm-hmm.
things kind of, give you that confidence to slowly build your, towards that
Mm-hmm.
vision. And then you also start dreaming more dreams when you see
Yeah.
that it's possible. So I'd say it's a journey. Again, it's not a silver bullet, but it's a lot of different
Yeah.
kinds of like support. Yeah.
I mean, you're ready to write a book already.
Well, Ela Bhatt has written a book already about it. I'm just sort of
Mm-hmm.
uh, talking about things that I've learned over the years. But yeah,
Mm-hmm. What are you looking forward to?
um, I think it's really exciting that a lot of this is it's uncharted territory, but maybe there isn't a strong enough vocabulary for describing these things or writing about these things. Also, the people who work in this sector, there's such an urgency, right? Poverty is such a big problem. People are working in mission mode. Most of the time, people don't have the time to write. It's also
Yeah.
the type of people who are working, they don't have the skills to write. So
Yeah.
for me, it's exciting to write, and I'm also in a position where I get to co-write with the people
Mm-hmm.
that I'm working with. So it's not extractive, and that's another journey I've had also, where just writing about poor people and sort of enhancing my own CV, so to speak. Whereas now I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
place where, okay, we're making something, it should benefit both of us. It's not fair if
Mm-hmm.
I'm, getting the mobility or
Yeah.
helping you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something exciting. I've always, a part of my role at all of the places has been to go to different places, what we call advocacy events, where
Mm-hmm.
we are trying to influence different stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And at SEWA, something exciting is that whenever there's an advocacy event, you don't go alone. There has to be someone from the movement. I will be always going with an informal worker who is putting
Mm-hmm.
across perspectives. So my role will, and it's exciting to be with leaders who are actually able to debate and have that
Mm-hmm.
confidence to put across unique perspectives with confidence and brevity.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be tokenistic, like we need to have a woman like this at the table, so just have her there. But
Mm-hmm.
they have the skill set. The organization has built their skill set up so that they can advocate for themselves. So for
Mm-hmm.
me now, it's going to be a very different kind of role where I'm in a supporting role, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a grassroots leader who's with me. And yeah, I think for me that's something that's really exciting, where we're doing the advocacy together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask you. We spoke so much of good stuff about collectives and seva and all. What do you think is the biggest challenges? Like, what do you think are problems which are not letting you all maybe reach your goals next year?
So I do think that, like I mentioned, uh, there's not enough people writing about this who write about this in the language that a donor would understand. So the language of evidence,
Um,
showing how this is efficient, how it's effective. So I think always this thing is in people's minds that will we get funds for the next year?
um,
Also, like my organization is 30 years old.
yeah.
Right? All of these organizations now, they see value in hiring young people like me, and young
Um,
people, those of us who are, have a strong education, we write well in English, that kind of a thing. But attrition is an issue. So
um,
somehow our generation has to move. Every 2 years it has to move. There's too much of
yeah.
extraction. So here there's a strong feeling that हमसे सीख करके हमसे ले करके खुद आगे बढ़ जाते हैं. It's a fact, and,
Um,
and they're not wrong to think that, because that is the trend that's happening.
yeah.
Many people come just to put SEWA on their CV. So I think creating systems which create a win-win. We can't help
Yeah.
and it's fine. Everyone wants to get ahead in life. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But how do we create systems where we are able to leverage and make the most of their time at the organization, and we are also able to teach people. I mean, having people who will be leaders tomorrow who have a kind of sensitivity to these issues also has value in the long run. So I
Yeah.
think creating systems where we're able to retain good talent, and create a win-win for the organization and for people coming in is I'd say a big challenge
Um,
organizationally. And I think this is also something that companies in general are sort of also grappling
yeah.
with. Yeah.
Yeah. I think retaining talent, especially in today's day, and I don't even know what the scene is with Gen Z. Like I only see the mockery on Instagram, but yeah, apparently like I don't work with any Gen Z people, but apparently working with them is just like a different skill set.
Yeah, they're very
Um,
fast. I
yeah,
currently lead a team where I have uh, four people who are like Gen Z. Chat
um,
GPT is like an extension of the hand.
yeah,
They're also like used to multitasking a lot, but then what I find is
yeah,
that that depth is not there, right? And
yeah,
even pushing people to think deeply, I feel
yeah,
becomes challenging, but very talented. But I
um,
feel there's this tendency to get bored easily. And that's kind
yeah,
of what technology also does to us, right? We're always
yeah,
swiping. Don't like it,
yeah,
don't like it, swipe.
yeah,
So yeah, that's
yeah. Look at us old people talking about Gen Z and how different they are.
yeah.
Um, the last question I actually have for you on this entire topic is, over the past, I think, decade, there's been so much of talk about India growing. Our stock markets are killing it. UPI, for example, is like talked about globally. Um, Everybody wants to invest in India. Are you seeing, and seems to be this narrative, I mean, not narrative, but there seems to be some commentary that this is actually just, some part of India which is benefiting. Like there are millions and millions of people who are actually, prices are getting expensive. There are no jobs. And that is a very different side. And all you're seeing is basically like rising inequality. And yes, both these can exist parallelly. Prices, I don't know if every time I come back, I'm like, what the hell? Like this is what Starbucks costs now. Like it's crazy.
Yes.
Um, what have you noticed in the last 10 years? Like, has all of this stuff around, more infrastructure, UPI making payments easier, Aadhaar making identity easier, has this helped that section of society, or has it not, or it hasn't made that much of a difference?
I don't know that I see any link with these things. I do feel that there's pressure on a certain section to sort of adapt and learn, like learning how to use UPI.
Yeah,
At the time, I mean, there's still a lot of people in India who don't have a bank account. So there was this
yeah,
scheme that Prime Minister Modi came up with, which is the Jan Dhan Yojana,
yeah,
which kind of pushed a lot of people to at least have a bank account. So I do think
yeah.
a lot of people criticize Aadhaar, but if the government
Hmm.
has to give you services, they have to see you,
Correct.
right? And it's only if you're counted can they give you services.
Yeah,
A lot of people are also saying, that they're pro sort of Aadhaar arguments, like, earlier the ration card was in the name of a
yeah,
household, and maybe, some people in the household weren't getting the benefits of it. But now, if your PDS or your food security entitlements are linked to your Aadhaar card as an individual and
Yeah.
not as a family, you are ensuring that each individual gets their required food security.
Yeah.
So I do feel that inequality is a much like is a very large issues, but all of these small tools like technology or
Hmm.
certain policy interventions, these can all be like pathways to solve a
Hmm.
larger problem. I
Hmm.
think they can be, if they can be leveraged. I
Hmm.
won't say that make a blanket statement that it has solved a problem, but I do think that
Hmm.
there is potential for these things to also work towards some kind of empowerment and progress. And I
Hmm.
think for people like us, it's also up to us to sort of think, okay, this is what is happening. How do we leverage it? I think
Yeah.
gone are the times where we're constantly fighting with the government. Or I know I do think it's a problem that sharing opinions in today's day and age, you have to be so careful. And I think that
Yeah.
that's problematic. We need an open, like a society where people can dialogue openly. But I
Yeah.
think for those of us in the social sector, we have to think strategically,
Hmm.
right? How do we leverage what's happening? And if there is no space for the type of target groups or the type of people we work with, how do we create spaces for them? So
Hmm.
just to give you another example, the government, like they've set up something called the GEM portal.
Hmm.
I think it's called Government E-Marketplace. But the
Hmm.
idea of that was to I mean, I think I'm not sure, and this is what I'm saying is based on my own because I was in the government. The idea
Hmm.
is to make it more government's own procurement processes
Yeah.
more like transparent, or to hold the government
Yeah.
accountable, right? You have to do it through this portal.
Yeah.
But there are some people who work with these women enterprises saying, well, hey, maybe create a quota, making it essential for the government to procure a certain amount of things from women-owned businesses.
Yeah.
A large, thing which a lot of women-owned business and women-owned businesses, meaning maybe 50% of the staff or the shareholders are women. The leadership is
Hmm.
a majority women. They
Hmm.
struggle with access to the market.
Yeah.
So, if government being a procurer, using procurement spaces uh, uh, to support these businesses, that the GEM portal itself then can be a tool to support these businesses. So
Yeah.
people like us who are doing advocacy need to then find these different platforms and see how we can argue, give recommendations to the government,
Yeah.
solid recommendations that can be implemented, that can be replicated, and also taken to scale, have potential to
Yeah.
be taken to scale, and then
Hmm.
create spaces for certain people to be included.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if I've
But you know you like I guess my question, do you see the problem getting worse? Like, do you see people finding it like that section of society finding it harder to get by
So
as time
definitely,
has
I think
progressed?
things are changing very fast now. So if you've not
Hmm.
had exposure, the divide is deepening more and more day by day.
Hmm.
Uh, but I mean, that's the world we live in.
Yeah. I guess like because people like me, I won't say I'm concerned aggressively, but there is a bit of a thing on the back of my mind of, the way how fast things have changed with AI and things like that. I'm like, hey, you know, maybe we are entering a phase wherein, we came from a generation wherein you go to university once, you're on a set of skills and you use those skills for the rest of your life because things were not changing that much. But now maybe we are on that first phase of a new era wherein you gotta like it will be normal for people, including us, to reskill ourselves every like 10 years because the way we do things is going to change.
I don't even think it's every 10 years. I think it's every 2 months, to be quite honest. There's always something new happening.
Yeah,
I think we were also the generation who learned something in college and are doing something else completely different.
correct.
And it's not
Yeah,
because it's not always because we didn't have direction. Industry is changing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
hey, actually, now that you talk about it, I do think this is something else where focusing on like hyper local economies could be
yeah,
something. A lot of the kind of services, and again, I'm giving the example of SEWA's business,
yeah,
cooperative businesses. A lot of them
mm,
are serving or creating services or addressing problems which are relevant in their 5 to 10 kilometer radius,
mm,
right? So for me, setting up a creche for women who
Hmm.
are working at construction sites, women, that's the small business I'm starting. Now,
Hmm.
not all of these are yet financially viable, right? But that's
Hmm.
where we come
Hmm.
in. Like, what can they do to
Yeah.
make it financially viable? But if we can
Yeah.
think of innovation in those terms, that's something that, that's a way of sort of not having to ever compete with. I mean, it's not about
Yeah.
selling your product on Amazon. It's finding something that you can sell to a lot of people close to you. I
Yeah.
think if we think in that direction, we
Hmm.
could do for a lot for poverty.
Okay. Enough of shop talk. As you look back over the last decade, have you had any shifts in belief? So something you believed very strongly as, say, 19-year-old or 18-year-old Neha that you've taken a 180-degree shift on.
I think I don't take myself so seriously anymore.
Hmm.
I think yeah, 19-year-old Neha took herself too seriously. I think I was just too preachy. I think I just thought I knew a lot about a lot of things. I really wanted to change the world. I still do want to I do want to change the world. Why are we here on earth if not to do
Hmm.
something? But I do feel that TK, I'm one piece of a larger, like the world and problems are much beyond me and it's really not about me. I think it's
Hmm.
not about me. That's my change in mindset.
Hmm. And was there like an event or a series of events which caused that change, or it was just
Yeah,
something
I think
gradual?
maybe moving from one organization to another. I think a lot of the time for those of us who are in a part of things where we are starting something, and
Yeah.
I do feel like that's a skill. I'm kind of an initiative taker. I like to do things.
Hmm.
You become so attached to them that you feel like, oh, if I leave, like what's going to happen to this? But things move on, things happen, and
Yeah.
they sometimes often they also become much better when you leave.
Yeah.
So just to come back to like why did we take certain initiatives? What were we trying to
Hmm.
do? And the note, just that of self-awareness that it's so much bigger than me, right? If I make it about
Yeah.
me, I'm kind of like just bottle, like, yeah,
Hmm.
kind of putting it into a kind of a box. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's the kind of.
Interesting. I wonder what Reuben's podcast without Reuben would be. Pretty shitty. So,
Yeah, that it would be.
Reuben's.
That's Reuben's. Hey.
I'm kidding. Two pieces of advice. What two pieces of advice would you have for 18 or 19-year-old Neha? Or maybe like actually, how old is Tara now? 20, 21,
Yeah,
22?
yeah, 21, I think. Yeah, 20.
Okay,
No,
but
no,
maybe for
20.
an 18-year-old
She's
Neha.
just 20.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. But what advice would you have
Yeah.
for 18-year-old Neha?
Don't take things I mean, not be serious about life, but I think
Hmm.
it's okay, like let go of things. I think for me, and this is something that actually Chayandar and I would talk about actually soon after college. For
Hmm.
people like me, it's so difficult to meet a deadline. It's because the thing is never good enough. I never
Hmm.
feel I've done well enough. So, he says कि हमने अपना I mean, this is CD's line कि
Hmm.
कलाकार लोग थे अब हम दुनियादारी
Hmm.
में अब हमने अपनी कलाकारी छोड़ दी है और दुनियादारी में काम करना पड़ रहा है.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
What is that in English?
it doesn't need to be perfect. If you are given two
Hmm.
days to finish a task, do it. Like, it's okay. You
Yeah.
can say it's a 2-day product and it's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And if someone is saying it's bad or something, it's not that I am bad. It's okay for me
Yeah.
to say when the deadline allowed for this. For me, I
Yeah.
think throughout college, I was always giving things 20 days late, 40 days late, because it was never
Yeah.
good enough. I always thought like, well, what will Professor Menon say? What will
Yeah.
yeah, but
Have you heard of Parkinson's law?
no.
It's the total opposite. It basically says that work will expand the time you give it.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
So if you give yourself 2 hours, you'll finish it up in 2 hours. If you give yourself a week, it'll take a week to finish. If you give yourself a month, it'll take a month to
Hey, but I
finish.
don't agree with that sometimes. I think a lot of the time I don't want to people to give me 2 hours. I want people to put some depth and you should use your brain. Uh,
Yeah, correct. I mean that's the extreme,
yeah.
but it's also like usually like more often than not you need much less time
Yeah.
because I mean the more time you give, it just takes
Yeah,
more.
I think,
Anyway.
yeah. I think that's what I also struggle from what people call imposter syndrome. I know you've talked about it
Hmm.
in your in one of your
Hmm.
not annual report, but your newsletter thingy with which
Yeah.
podcast.
I think you're the only one who reads that newsletter.
Really?
Do you read every edition which comes?
Yeah,
No, right?
most of them. It's pretty
Why do
easy
you read it? Like,
because it's yours, and it's like it's
hmm.
easy to like skim and go through it. It's short and it's interesting. Yeah,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
I
I've been on the fence of writing that because
no,
I'm
but
like, I don't
it's
even know how I
nice.
should
Yeah,
write
it's
it.
nice. I think don't like. I mean, I enjoy reading it, and it to me it's
Hmm.
like, oh, there's someone else who's having the same problem, or there's someone else who's thinking like
Hmm.
that. And by the way, I think
Interesting.
your podcast is all about now market research and understanding what different kinds of people are. Now that you mentioned it, I feel like you're getting ready to catch a lot of different kinds of apples because
Oh,
you
really?
know how so many people think. Um,
Yeah. I don't know what apples I'm waiting to catch, but
no, I'm not saying
yeah,
you're being matlabi. I'm not
I
saying you're being matlabi about
no.
it, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
in a way, learning about people is like a way of expanding your own horizons.
Yeah. A lot of the questions I ask people are questions I'm trying to figure out. And I think just getting this opportunity to talk to somebody and bounce it, like I learn like something or something becomes a little bit more obvious or something a little bit more clearer. Because otherwise these are just conversations you have in your head on head. But anyway, good to know that you like reading it. I will continue writing it, maybe with lesser frequency. But
Yeah,
so
second
first
piece
advice,
of
we don't take it.
advice would be like you
Yes.
don't have to control everything. I think like
Hmm.
yeah. So let me just say
Do you
this.
think you would control everything?
Yeah, I think I do have these tendencies where I don't trust people enough, so I'll keep on like show me what you're doing. I'll keep micromanaging.
Hmm.
I think it's something that I'm getting over. I'm learning to delegate, and I think it's.
Hmm.
I found it very annoying when people do that with me, and
Hmm.
but I also behave like that with a lot of people. So I think that that's
Hmm.
something that I'm. If you wanted two pieces of advice, I can say it succinctly, so you can just delete the whole the previous part.
No, it's okay.
Don't take yourself
Um,
too seriously. And second, yeah, you don't have to control everything. Just be
hmm.
things move work out. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. As we wrap up, after all the questions I've asked you, you get to ask me one question. What do you have for me?
Yeah. So, what is it that keeps you going? I know that in college you were really entrepreneurial, always, full of ideas. I want to do this. I want to do that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And when are we going to see you start your own business? Because I
Oh,
feel like that was always like your dream to have your own business or to create some kind of incubator where you're always incubating other people's
yeah.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. How do I answer that succinctly? Let me think.
It doesn't have to be succinct. You can just edit it out.
No, I don't want to edit. That's why it's painful. That's harder. It's harder to edit than answer succinctly. Um, I so ever since university, yes, I think I've always like had this intention of starting something of my own. Whenever people ask me, "Hey, what do you eventually want to do?" I'm like, "Oh, I want to run something of my own." But I've over the past 3-4 years, I think I've tried to be very honest with myself. If I am actually, do I have it in me to start something of my own? And as time progresses, I would say I'm getting less and less convinced that I have it in me.
Hmm.
I think I do like new things. I like the act of creating something new. I feel I have this urge of expressing. I won't say expressing myself. It seems very like artistic thing. I don't think I'm artistic, but like I think there is that energy wherein I I, I want people to see, read, watch what I think,
Mhm.
and I like the people. I like the energy I get from people and being around people. And historically, I think I would attribute those three desires or wants to the way I do this is start something of my own or run my own business or whatever, right? And I think what I'm slowly realizing is maybe that is not the like that's not the logical conclusion. Um, Working backwards, what I've also realized that you start a company when you have a problem to solve, but you really care about this problem and you want to solve that problem. Um, and again, there are many ways you can solve the problem. Starting a company is not the only way. It's one of the many ways that you can solve a problem. but that is probably a better motivation on starting from. So yeah, so I'm in this phase wherein I want to do those three things more, and I'm questioning if starting a company, doing a startup, raising venture capital is the only way to meet that, because it comes with a lot of other things which I don't like. Like, I don't like too much stress. I don't like, I do not really like being answerable to too many people. Like, I've realized I just do not like those things. So, I mean, I'm at the phase where, I'm trying to play around with, like, this podcast is a great format. Right? It gives me great joy. I think it allows me to, like, be creative, express. It is something of my own. It is not, quote unquote, a business, but it ticks off a lot of the boxes that I enjoy. I jokingly tell people, or maybe I should start a restaurant, right? Everybody knows the business of a restaurant is absolute sucky. You make no money on it. But maybe that's not the point. Like, maybe the whole point of this is not to run a business. So I don't know. That's where I am right now. I still maybe I think I like the challenge of working at startups, working on a challenging problem. And that's something maybe I do. Like, historically, I was always anti-big company, anti-corporate. I'm going to be working at a pretty large company. So yeah, that's where I am. Maybe I start something, maybe I don't. But I think it's a bit more nuanced on the intention behind why I want to do something of my own is these three specific things, and I feel there are other ways that I can get it. So yeah, that's my learnings around starting or being CEO or being founder. So yeah.
Well, I never took you to be a big CEO or big founder type, but I did think you to take you to be someone who thrives in like pursuing an idea.
Yeah, correct.
I actually never thought I always thought you wanted to be rich, but I never thought you wanted to be a big CEO. Like, I mean, somehow I never connected the two. Not that I didn't connect the two, I didn't see you as being.
But then what does it look like? What does it look, what was it, how would you envision pursuing an idea and not being a CEO? What does that look like?
No, it's not about, well, maybe I'm talking about the optics of it, right? Like a Mark Zuckerberg is a big CEO, but it's like whatever. I don't think he's the type of person who cares about the money, post money, as you say. For him, it's like thriving on like, okay, building softwares, doing this with, that's it. So I think, that's the quality that I kind of associate with you as well. So I know you like money, but
I mean, okay, as we wrap up, Neha, if people want to keep up with all the stuff you're doing, how best can they do that?
I just give me a call. I don't know, hit me up, write to me on WhatsApp, and
well, if they don't have your number and they're not getting it on this podcast, how else can they reach you? LinkedIn, Instagram,
Instagram,
yeah. Okay, you'll find the her handles in the show notes. And I think with that, I think this is a good point to wrap up. Thank you again, Neha, for making time. We finally did this after, what, a year, 2 years? When did I first ask you to do this?
I think you asked me three, or when you had just started the podcast, you asked me 3 or 4 times. I'd also see on LinkedIn, like, Reuben has viewed your profile. Then I was like, no, I'm so sorry. Like, I mean, my fear was that it would be like too much like rambling and going in circles. And I feel like probably I think, is this probably your longest conversation?
Not my longest, but yeah, I would say most conversations are in the 145 to 215. So in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you feel it was round and round?
I never feel it's round and round, but I think other people feel it's round and round. So
it's okay. Cool. With that, we shall wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you like the conversation, you can consider subscribing or leaving a review on Spotify or wherever you're listening this to. And if you've enjoyed this, consider dropping Neha a like. I'm sure she'll be happy to hear from you.
Yeah.